Well, Wizards revealed the metagame for Standard in the World Championship that will be happening later today. And, oh my goodness. 69% Esper. 22 out of 32 decks are Esper. And, honestly, I'm a little bit surprised, but at the same time, I feel like most players in Standard currently, most people have felt that Esper is actually the best deck, and to see that being confirmed at this level of play and with this amount of professional players is a little bit scary, because I feel like this tournament really cements the metagame going forward. Everybody who sees that tournament is going to be like, okay, I need to play this Esper deck. I need to play this Esper deck. It's the best deck. So we're going to most likely see a lot more Esper going forward, and that is a little bit scary for this metagame. And there really isn't any deck that has that good of a matchup against it. I mean, I'm always for bans, because they would shake up the meta and would, for the most part, if enough cards are banned, make a metagame more balanced in general. So I'd really like to see some bans, especially when a deck like this pops up. And well, I mean, it's been around for a bit, but you know what I mean. When a deck like this literally has everything that you could possibly want in Magic, having two drops, two of the best 2-drops in the entire game, both being creatures that can be discarded from your hand with the connive and go into the graveyard and still be cast after that is insane. And they're also incredible 2-drops to curve Raffine into. Like, it's insane. These cards, these 2 cards here, Denik and Tenacious Underdog, are simply insane in this deck. You can, the fact that you don't get punished for playing a 2-drop and like drawing it in the mid game when you have a Raffine out, just throw that in the graveyard and you're good. I mean, it's just card advantage. It's insane. Lifelink is crazy in this meta. It turns off all aggro decks, so having a 2/3 that also comes back as a 3/2. I mean, and also the cards in graveyards can't be the target of spells of abilities. I mean, this Denik is just so good. Denik is just so good. I mean, what can I say? Like, the fact that even without the static, even without the you can't target the graveyard, it would still be a good card. The fact that on top of that, in this metagame, we have cards that target the graveyard is just insane. And then obviously we all know about Underdog. 3/2 ridiculous stats also comes back as a haster. Like, my goodness. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely diving deep into what makes this deck good. We can keep going, and then I'll talk more about like what we should do, or what Wizards should do, or what I want Wizards to do. But yeah, okay, so we've gone through the 2-drops. Let's go through the creatures first. So 2-drops, we talked about Raffine. Completely insane. Why does this have ward? It's already a flyer. It's already 1/4. The ward makes it so that when you are on the play as a Raffine player, I mean, your opponent just cannot kill it without cut down if you curve it out or counter it. They can counter it, but that's only for blue decks. No other color has a 1-mana removal spell that destroys Raffine when you're on the play. It's truly insane. Ridiculous card. The ward is what pushes it low too hard. And then, as I mentioned before, with every card in this deck having synergy with each other for the most part, probably the best 4-drop creature in the game. Shield Red. I mean, I'm sure you've played against it. I'm sure you played with it. This card is ridiculous. It completely dominates games for no reason. It's a insane blocker, incredible attacker, and also slowly wins you the game while delaying your chances of losing the game. Like, it is insane. Why was this card printed as it is? I mean, obviously to sell, but this card is too strong and shuts down all types of aggro decks because they cannot get through a 4/5 body reliably. And even if they can, you play multiple copies, and if they don't deal with it, you're gaining life, you're dealing damage, you don't need to attack. The game is just solely in your favor at that point. Some lists have multiple copies of Owl, some have one, some have none. I personally think this card is great, but this is an example of a very strong card, very powerful card, but it doesn't feel incredibly oppressive. It is very strong, but it, as a 5-drop, it feels like that power is kind of more warranted. Also, yeah, it doesn't come in early enough where things can get out of hand. Sure, it can win the game by itself, but for a 5-drop at this point, I feel like that's okay. I feel like that's okay. All right. Another thing that makes this deck completely mind-blowingly busted is that it has the best interaction in the entire standard format. So not only does it have the best access to some of the best creatures, the best permanents, cut down, best 1-mana removal spell in the game, destroy evil, one of the best pieces of interaction in this meta because everybody's playing sagas, everybody's playing Shield Red, everybody's playing let me think, everybody's playing Wedding Announcement. Is just great. It's super good, and Infernal Grasp just kills any creature. It's just fine. It's a good card. Void Ren, uncounterable, goes through ward. Not a bad card. Probably don't want more than one though, it's pretty expensive. Urtai is just a fine card. Urtai is a balanced card. We have a few balanced cards. We have this and Cathar Commando. Cathar Commando, really good, has flash. Aggressive creature, destroys all the enchantments, a lot of enchantments in this meta. And then we have the best blue counter spell in the meta. So, I mean, at this point you see a trend, right? The best. I mean, card has synergy with Wedding Announcement. Card has synergy with the 2-drops that can go into the graveyard and be cast later. Best tempo counter spell in the game. Like, it pains me because you have to, when you're playing against Esper, you have to play around so much. You have to play around their aggression. You have to play around their controlling aspects. Like, they can adapt their pace to whatever hand they draw. Like, this deck is so flexible. It's baffling. Kaito is just a balanced planeswalker, honestly. It's very strong, but it's also not going to dominate the game by itself. It needs support. Then we have a card that can dominate the game by itself, Wandering Emperor, kind of. Not completely Shield Red level or Raffine level, but this card is a problem. I've always felt like Wandering Emperor was too strong. You should never really have a flash planeswalker because, well, I guess you could, but it should not be able to also be played aggressively. I think that's the problem. The problem is Wandering Emperor is extremely flexible, and that's what makes this card disgusting. And I do think that this card should be banned, but we'll talk about that another time. More removal, and if you're playing a matchup where they don't want to attack, 2/2, another 2/2, +1/+1 on something, give it first strike. First strike is so good when you're attacking because you want to attack with Raffine. Annoying, this card is too good. Wedding Announcement, well, I mean, at this point, Wedding Announcement's been a mainstay in Standard for a while now. The card is just super strong. Having an Anthem effect that's delayed is actually really good because obviously it makes I mean, this card is so good. This card is everything you'd want out of an Anthem, out of an enchantment that will turn into an Anthem. Like, it is so good to have the flexibility of either making a token or drawing. This card just does it just does too much. For 3 mana, it's too much. It is just too much. Then what's even more disgusting, and something that people might not see at a glance, is that why is this deck playable in the first place? Well, Raffine's Tower, insanely good pain lands. Both, we have 2 sets of pain lands in this deck, which most 3-color decks don't have access to 2. They only have 1. So this deck has very good untapped mana, and having the tri-land makes everything a lot smoother for you. A lot smoother, and it cycles. My goodness. This deck has everything. Even the channel lands are extremely good. All 3 of these are top tier. I mean, most of the channel lands are really good, but these are some of the very best, right? This, especially in this deck, with a lot of legendaries, these can channel for 2 mana less than their original cost, and that's just insane. And then we can talk about the sideboard. Having blue gives you access to hard counters in the sideboard for, well, specifically non-creature spells, I guess. Hard counters for non-creature spells. I don't know if you're supposed to say they're hard counters or not. But, yeah, having blue in your deck means that you're going to have a very good matchup against control decks. Duress, you can have however many Duress you want. And then the ultimate irony card, Farewell, which I'm assuming most people in the World Championship are going to be playing. Farewell being played in a mid-range creature deck, or it's not really, well, in a deck that has a lot of permanence, it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating to have to play against a deck like this, but also have to worry about them farewelling you if they're ever behind. And Farewell disables, so yeah, the fact this deck has white is so strong. Farewell completely disables some strategies, like enchantments, for example. So having to play against this deck as like a synergy or archetype type, very like artifacts or enchantments or just creatures, like you are gonna get destroyed by this pretty much. But mostly if you're playing artifacts and enchantments, because then they can exile your stuff while keeping their stuff. I mean, that's what makes Farewell so disgusting. Reckoner Bankbuster, it's in every deck, whatever. I mean, I guess that's about it, really. So, is this deck too strong in the meta? On ladder, it hasn't really felt that way, but I think it's because most people are really trying to explore different deck lists. But I'm very scared of what this will mean for the future of the metagame, and if we get locked into an Esper meta, which seemingly has good matchups against everything in the metagame, unless we find a counter to this deck, which I don't think exists, because again, it does too much. Decks that do too many things, too many different things, are extremely difficult to counter. And yeah, we're gonna have to, in my opinion, we're gonna have to see some bans, and especially Raffine, which is the glue in this deck. This card holds the deck together. Without it, it would definitely still be a good deck. It might still be tier 1, but it would be very much so less oppressive. The reason that, yeah, I've already mentioned it, right? The reason why this card holds everything together is that conniving, not only does it give you stats sometimes, but well, it gives you stats on your call as well, so it's very strong. Anyways, conniving gives you consistency, which without it, this deck doesn't really have ways to get to your cards that you need, your answers or your threats, as consistently. So like, if you have a Make Disappear but you want to play a creature out, you can discard a Make Disappear, for example. Or if you're looking for removal, you can just start discarding lands or creatures trying to dig for a removal, right? So this card can snowball by itself just from the stats it gives, but it can also save your game by getting you to that one card that you might need, for example. And the fact that it's a flyer means that it's very difficult to block, if not straight up impossible in the early game. And it protects itself with a ward, and it scales, and the connive effect procs off of other creatures attacking, so it doesn't even need to attack. You get the effect immediately upon it entering the battlefield, for the most part, if you have any creatures that can attack. Man, it's just a lot thinking about how powerful this deck is. And really, if I'm being honest here, I think so many of these cards could potentially see a ban, and I would be totally fine with it, honestly. But again, banning is a difficult subject, because if you ban something, you have to ban something else from other top decks, or they're just going to take over. Like, you'd have to ban Fable, for example. But again, we'll go over that later in a later video. I just think it's sad to watch a tournament of this level where pretty much we're only going to see mirror matches. It's unfortunate. I feel like this could have been remedied before we got to this point, but I think it is what it is. I mean, it's never too late to make changes, and I really do think that there's a chance that Wizards could decide to shake things up after this tournament, although it's a pretty low chance, just looking at their track record. It's definitely a pretty low chance. I don't feel like anything's gonna go. I really wish that they would tune this deck down a little bit, because when I'm actually I don't usually play this deck, but when I look at it, like, I understand that this is just unparalleled. I feel like everything in this deck just makes sense. Everything in this deck feels powerful. You have answers to literally every type of permanent. You have counter spells. You have non-creatures, non-creature permanents that aren't planeswalkers. Like, you have flash planeswalkers. You have cards that come back from the graveyard. You have lands that can cycle, that can channel. My goodness, I mean, But yeah, I think that's about all the thoughts I have on Esper and on the World Championship standard metagame. I guess we'll have to wait and see how this tournament pans out, and I really do hope that we see one of the underdog decks, way less represented decks, do well in this tournament and prove all the players that thought Esper was the best wrong. Like, maybe there is a secret exact build of a deck, even though most of these archetypes that I'm seeing have been like Jund midrange, Jund reanimator, Azorius control. Azorius control is interesting. Bant tokens, that's something different. But let's say half of the less popular archetypes that were brought to this tournament are things that we haven't really seen much of, and maybe with some specific tech cards or a specific build, they could have a good matchup into this, and that's all we can hope for at this point. Anyways, don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos, and follow me on Twitch to watch me live.